I am a sucker for a good short story, and O. Henry was one of the best of the short story writers. Now, around this time of year, you often hear at least about the story that he wrote, The Gift of the Magi. But one of my favorites is one a little bit less known that for me just captures a deeper sense of this spirit of this time of year. And it's his short story called The Last Leaf. The Last Leaf has a couple of characters who live in Greenwich Village, New York. Two ladies that live together, Sue and Johnsy, the downstairs painter, Behrman, and the doctor. And in this story, pneumonia is running rampant through the Greenwich Village community. And Johnsy gets a severe case of pneumonia. And in her delirium, in her fighting the disease, she starts to get it in her head that the vine outside of her window is a symbol of her life. And as in the cold and the snow and the rain of the winter season, as the leaves begin to blow off, she sees that or imagines that her life is diminishing and feels that when the last leaf falls off, that she will die. She has this in her head. The doctor is very worried because the will to live is so important, but no one can seem to inspire this in her. Morning after morning, they open the curtains to find less and less leaves, and her condition goes down and down. But there's one last leaf that refuses to fall off. And as it stays, Johnsy becomes inspired by it. If the last leaf can hold on, then maybe she can as well. Unfortunately, at the very same time, the downstairs neighbor, Behrman, a painter who always wanted to paint a masterpiece and never did, he ends up with pneumonia. And in fact, they find out that his clothes are cold and wet, and he ends up dying just downstairs. And when Johnsy is well enough to get out of bed and go inspect the last leaf, she finds that it was painted by Behrman in the middle of the night, which is how he lost his life. To paint something to inspire her by the last leaf. That story makes me think so much of that ability to be used, to live out the love that God has, to be love for someone else. Throughout this series, we've been exploring different kinds of love as we're getting ready for Christmas. We started out by looking how the prophets looked to see love, waited and hoped for Jesus as we wait for Jesus. Then last week, we talked about giving love, that we reflect the gifts of the wise men as we give gifts, and we have the opportunities to give love. And now this morning, I want to talk about how we have the opportunity to be love. How we can be used by God to be love. And we have such wonderful inspiration in the midst of this, in the characters, in the persons of the Christmas story, in Joseph and in Mary. Peggy already read for us the story of Joseph and his powerful part in this drama. And Mary as well is so central to the Christmas story. I want to read to you the account or part of the account of Mary's part, particularly when she is informed and connected with this story. So we find that in the Gospel of Luke. Matthew focuses on Joseph, and Luke tells us Mary's story. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary. And he, the angel, came to her and said, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was much perplexed by his words. Even in the Bible, angelic visitations, especially from one as regal as Gabriel, are rare. And so she pondered, she wondered what sort of greeting this might be. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." But Mary, a practical girl, said to the angel, "How can this be, since I am a virgin?" The angel said to her, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be holy. He will be called the Son of God. And now your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived a son, and this is the 6th month for her who was said to be barren. For nothing will be impossible with God." What a powerful reminder that nothing will be impossible for God. Then Mary, she said, "Here I am, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." And the angel departed from her. I want to have us think a little bit this morning of how each of them, Mary and Joseph, that part that they play as they are part of this story, as how they let themselves be love in the Christmas story. And probably the thing that stands out most about each of them is their willingness to be used by God, to say yes to God. In fact, if there's one thing I want you to hold on to and remember about them, is their willingness to say, "Yes, I will let myself be used." I mean, could we imagine the Christmas story without Mary and Joseph? Could we picture like a manger scene, where there's just no Joseph, just Mary in the barn all by herself doing it all? He could have said no. You could well see Joseph just saying, "You know what? This is a little bit much for me. I'm out of here." But he agrees. He goes along with what God's plan is. He lets God use him. And Mary as well. Could you picture Mary going, "No, I don't think so. There's a real nice girl 2 doors down. Gabriel, could you go visit her?" No. Each of them plays the part that God lays out for them. They say yes to God's plan. And the story unfolds in the way that we are familiar with it, but only because they are willing to be love, to be used by God. And that can inspire us, especially at this time of year, but throughout the year, as those situations, as those opportunities come along, those places where we have the choice to say, like Mary or Joseph, "Yes, Lord, use me. Whatever I can do in this situation, let me be the right person." Or not. Pass by, Lord. Somebody else can volunteer for that situation. Somebody else can help that person in need. It's a choice we all have. To be part of the drama, the play that is God's world unfolding around us. or to say, no, pass by, use somebody else. Mary and Joseph inspire us by their willingness to be part of this story we know so well. In spite, as well, of the confusion that's part of it. We hear that so clearly, especially with Mary, as she starts to wonder. The word that you often hear in the story with Mary is she pondered. Go figure that she pondered, that she wondered, that she was confused by all that was happening in her and through her with Jesus. But when you say yes to God, when you make up your mind to be loved, to be used by God, there will be confusing moments. It's just part and parcel. In fact, I wouldn't wonder that any worthy situation, any place of love, would bring its own sense of confusion. When you engage in a relationship, marriage, or other romantic relationship, you never know how it's going to unfold. I have some dear friends of mine who, just a month or two after their wedding, were in a major car accident and didn't expect to spend their first year of marriage in hospitals and surgeries and months of physical therapy. But you don't know how it's going to unfold. Having a child is one of those experiences of how it unfolds. You don't know how things are going to go. There's always confusion. Beginning a new job, beginning a new ministry, you never know how these things are going to unfold. And we have to have a tolerance for that confusion. If you're a person that likes to see it all mapped out and know how things are going to unfold, how God is going to use you, then you'll be frustrated. Or if, like Mary, you say, okay, I'll just ponder and try and figure it out along the way. Roll with whatever it is that God has for me to do. Then it's going to be a wild ride. I have a dear friend of mine in ministry who, when those situation comes along, she says in the back of her mind, she hears the Indiana Jones theme music. Off on an adventure. As confusing as it might be. I love the prayer. I think it's in one of our Lutheran books, hymnals, that starts something like, "O God, you call your servants to endings unknown, by paths untrodden." That's what it is to be love. You don't know how it's going to unfold, but you know God will be with you. Even despite the hurt, the difficulty, the pain that often comes along. That's the last part. To being love is to do that despite the hurt. Again, Joseph is such a wonderful reminder of this in his part in the story. I always identify a little bit more with Joseph as the guy in the story. I can't quite identify with the pregnancy that Mary experiences, but I can imagine what it would be like if a month or so before our wedding, my wife Carolyn had said, "I'm pregnant." And I knew it wouldn't be mine. I can imagine what that hurt and pain that he must have felt until that dream. In the scene I showed you from the Nativity, it was within Jewish law to stone, to kill a woman prepared for marriage who had been unfaithful. And yet, Joseph chooses not to take that track and just dismiss Mary quietly with a broken heart until he receives the word from God. He lets that pain go. And when we engage in being used by God, when we are love for someone else or in a situation, there will be hurt. There will be difficulty. The Christmas story is a reminder of that. It's not a sweet, easy story. But to be love is to have your heart broken and yet be used by God. I sometimes think about a conversation I had many years back with a lovely couple who adopted 4 children. And these kids grew up in hell. Their mom was drug addicted and was rarely there, and when she was not a good mother at all. The kids were of different fathers, and the one boy, when they came to my friends, had cigarette burns on him. And the kids were so confused about what was taking place in their family that they called their oldest sister Mommy, because she was more a mother to them than their real mother. And raising these 4 kids was a huge challenge for my friends. There were all kinds of difficulties. There was counseling. There were visits by the police. There was drug use. The experience of what these kids had grown up in left them challenged and scarred for life. And when I had dinner with my friends and they were talking about this, they made the comment something like, if we had known what it was going to be like to adopt these kids, we would not have done it. But it was my privilege to remind them of what they had done for them. How they had changed their life, provided them a home with love and care that they would not have experienced otherwise. That hurt was part of the love. And I suspect as well that any time we truly pour out our hearts in love, it comes with pain. It comes with difficulty. Maybe then we know that we have truly been used by God when it hurts a little bit along the way. When we imagine, and I'm not the first to point this out, the Christmas story, it is usually all beautiful and clean and shining and bright. But when you pay attention to the story, it has a lot of hurt, both in the story and after the story. And then, of course, even in Jesus' ultimate journey to the cross. But they inspire us, Mary and Joseph. We can't imagine the story without them. And they inspire us to enter into the same Christmas story. To be love. To be love.